With the tensions in the Middle East not letting up, and with repeated anti-Israeli government sentiment coming from Turkish President Erdoğan, Binkov decided to compare the two militaries. This video will explore if Israel or Turkey has a stronger military, but not just by comparing dry numbers. We will actually simulate a limited and not so limited war between the two. Could Israel, with its more numerous and more powerful air force, defeat Turkey? Or could Turkey, with its more numerous ground army, outplay Israel? The video will cover the air war, missile arsenals and air defenses, ground war and naval combat. So stay tuned. As in any Binkov hypothetical war video, some rules apply, so we don't dissolve into a comparison of a bunch of allied nations fighting a much bigger war. Both belligerents act alone, with no outside help. Current wars any belligerents are involved in also suddenly stop, as that would be too close to breaking the no allies rule. Israel and Turkey don't share a border, but the Syrian government has feeble control over its territory due to the decade-long civil war. So for the sake of this exercise, we'll just say both sides will traverse Syrian territory as they see fit, with Syrian and all other forces getting out of their way. Other borders and countries will be modeled as neutral and impassable. Is that geopolitically realistic? No, but we're comparing militaries, not modeling a realistic World War III. There's almost 300 miles of Syrian terrain to cross though, so any fighting on the ground would wait a bit, as the two air forces that would clash first. The Israeli Air Force is quite numerous, and its combat planes are on average quite modern. The F-35s are stealthy jets that are simply in another league compared to anything Turkey has. The F-15s are again a class of large fighter jets that Turkey doesn't use, even if equipment-wise they're not cutting edge anymore. Same can be said for Israeli F-16 fleet. It's modern, but there are more modern variants of F-16s out there, outside Israel and Turkey. Turkish F-16s don't have AESA radars either. Technically, the first 3 Turkish F-16s upgraded with domestically developed systems were delivered some 5 months ago, but A, that's not a meaningful number, and B, it appears they did not come with the AESA radar. Most of Turkish F-16s are fairly new, upgraded over the years to the technology level of the 2000s. Israeli F-16s are of similar tech levels, though with many domestic systems, some of which may be more advanced. Turkey may be short on medium-range air-to-air missiles. Both countries use AMRAAM and domestically produced missiles, but while Israel has been making its own Derby missile for over a decade, Turkish missiles have been proclaimed ready for service only a month or two ago, so they are not available in meaningful numbers. Turkey does have more aerial early warning planes. 4 potent E-7 planes, the same type the US Air Force is going to procure. Israel shrunk its AWACS-type fleet and is content with using just a pair of modern domestically developed platforms, using Gulfstream jets. Such planes provide timely warning even against low-flying attack formations. The distances involved are such that both sides would easily reach one another, though Turkey being so large would not be as easy to cover entirely. Basically, most of Israel is within 500 miles from Turkey, while most of Turkey is some 700 miles from Israel. That compactness of Israel is both a blessing and a curse. Israel can't as easily disperse its forces and is, in theory, easier to hold under air surveillance. But it's also easier to defend, precisely because Israel can enjoy overlapping missile defenses, and its planes can provide timely protection anywhere in Israel, from any base in Israel. Turkey would have to divide its air forces to protect its entire country. That air defense and missile defense protection is another advantage Israel has. Israel's main SAM system is the domestic David Sling, as the Patriot has been all but retired and likely replaced one for one with the David Sling. The Arrow system can't intercept airplanes as it's tailor-made to engage medium and large ballistic missiles. That's a category of defenses that Turkey lacks almost entirely. It has the 2 S-400 batteries that it got from Russia, which have some anti-ballistic missile capability, but only against slower medium-sized missiles. plus those S-400 batteries are basically the only modern long-range SAM Turkey has. Those would be sorely needed to protect against aircraft as well. 2 batteries would struggle to cover and protect even a part of Turkey. Ideally, a Turkey-sized country would require at least a dozen such systems. Ranges in parentheses really show only the class of the system, not the capability, as Rapiers and Hawks are already obsolete level equipment from the middle of the Cold War. Early Cold War Nike Hercules is basically useless against modern tactical jets. That's if Turkey even has some still operational, which is unclear. HISARs are modern domestic systems, likely capable, but short-ranged. Turkey's domestic long-range SAM, Cyper, is nearing the end of development, but won't be fielded for another year or two. Basically, if Turkish planes get near Israel, they will be faced with not only more numerous and better equipped Israeli Air Force, but also with a layered, numerous and modern SAM network. While if Israeli planes get near Turkey, there may be some areas where defenses simply won't be as thick, due to Turkey's size and inability of less numerous Turkish assets to be everywhere at once. Israel also likely has a larger inventory of various standoff missiles to attack with. Turkey may have some edge in ground-launched missiles, but those generally lack range compared to air-launched weapons. And Israeli missile defenses were devised to fight against ballistic missiles, further blunting Turkey's edge. Exact inventory figures do not exist, but the sheer volume of various Israeli weapon types suggests Israel's advantage. Israel has the Spice Bomb family, Popeye cruise missile, the Rampage and Rox air-launched missiles, and the small Delilah missile. Plausibly also the Icebreaker cruise missile and possibly Wind Demon, though that one is quite new. Large cruise missile Popeye Turbo is also air-launchable, though there is really no info on such strategic weapons. Long-range ground-launch missiles are not as plentiful. There's the Laura ballistic missile and the Popeye Turbo ground/submarine-launched variant. In comparison, Turkey's ground-launched missiles cover Chinese-derived Bora family, the new Typhoon ballistic missile, and some US-sourced ATACMS. Air-launched ones include the Som family of compact cruise missiles and the new Takir very small cruise missile. Using the CIPRI's database of weapon transfers, even if it does not offer complete info, it's again visible that Israel has simply been getting many more guided bombs and missiles over the decades. Note that many other Israeli procurements may be hidden in the US aid, and that domestic Israeli guided weapons production has been ongoing for far longer than Turkish domestic production. That being said, Israel has surely used up many more weapons over the decades, compared to Turkey. Bottom line again is that Turkey would be suffering more missile and bomb attacks than Israel, and when taking into account more plentiful and more advanced air defenses that Israel has, the number of weapons actually reaching Israeli soil would shrink a bit further. To properly target anything, targeting information is first needed. Israel has more combat aircraft to hang various recon pods off, and a decade or two of lead when it comes to production of domestic recon systems, likely leading to a better and larger inventory. Israeli recon drone inventory figures are essentially non-existent in the public domain, so they can't be compared with Turkish ones. It is possible, however, that when it comes to sheer numbers, Turkey has some more recon drones. It certainly has larger drones like the Akinci, but drones used on their own are basically sitting ducks. Bayraktars are nowhere to be seen in Ukraine anymore, for example. Out of the 2 air forces is the Israeli one, which is better equipped to fly protective missions, guarding their recon drones. Satellites are not numerous enough to be decisive recon platforms for either side, but again Israel holds a visible edge there, especially considering it also has radar imaging satellites, which are useful during night and overcast weather. When all this is summed up, Israel would be the one who'd be finding more targets, who'd be landing more bombs and missiles on those targets, and who'd be protecting both its air fleets and its national borders more efficiently. It's hard to say by how much, but even if it's by a little, it would add up over time. Turkey would have 2 choices: to play defensively, not venturing outside its borders, That way, it might keep its air force alive longer and inflict sizable, perhaps even comparable damage to Israeli air forces. Or it could decide to attack with a large ground force via Syria and fairly quickly lose most of its air forces that would be trying to protect those vast ground formations, and then, gradually, suffer sizable losses in vehicles as well, as Israel keeps pounding them while those approach Israeli borders. If Israel would press forward through Syria with its ground forces, it too would need to rely on air cover, which would mean that once near Turkey, their numerical advantage in air would melt away, and the protection of Israeli air defenses would be more or less non-existent. Israeli SAM systems, while potent, are not really designed to be very mobile. Turkish HISAR SAMs are much more mobile, though not of long enough reach nor available in high enough numbers yet. Israel too would lose some vehicles to Turkish air power, though on a lesser scale. Israeli ground troop losses would increase drastically as Israeli formations would reach close to Turkey. Trying to upkeep logistics for a few 100,000 troops and their vehicles over several hundred miles of Syria, that would be a challenge in itself, let alone when the enemy is actively trying to mess it all up. Of course, given a large enough force and enough persistence, crossing to the enemy's side could still be done, especially considering that neither Israel nor Turkey have US kind of bomb inventory. Israel had to urgently order bombs from the US last year, as it was using them up too quickly. According to Euromed Human Rights Monitor, Israel used 70,000 tons of bombs by June 2024. That's likely over 100,000 guided bombs. Whether Israel still has tens of thousands of bombs left, or even another 100,000, that's very hard to say. Turkey would still be best served by moving in very small groups, using simple vehicles, or even moving on foot. If resorting to large armored vehicle formations, those would get wrecked quickly, just like we saw with Iraq back in 1991 or in war in Ukraine. Guided rounds are simply too lethal against armor. So in a way, none of the vehicle figures we're about to mention would mean all that much for such an early rush. Turkey has more tanks. All the figures include reserve stocks. While all Israeli tanks have been quite modernized, only Turkish tanks that are reasonably modern are the Leo 2A4 and M60s, which have largely been modernized. That's roughly 1100 tanks. Leo 1s still seriously lack in protection. Israel curiously doesn't rely on infantry fighting vehicles, but on APCs. Its overall fleet numbers are huge, though the M113 used by both sides is basically a death trap nowadays. Turkey relies on a plethora of armored cars and trucks to complement their less numerous APCs. Artillery-wise, Turkey is a much heavier user, but for artillery to get to any sort of useful range, the air threat would need to be relegated to a nuisance, otherwise those guns would hardly reach across Syria. Once again, it's small infantry formations that might be most decisive, as we've seen in the war in Ukraine. Of course, both sides could form many such formations. Israel has a very robust army reserve system. We saw that again last year, when it mobilized over 300,000 reservists within several days. That's close to its entire number of army reserves. Most countries, Turkey included, would struggle to assemble their reservists to useful units in less than a few months. Ukraine took little over 4 months to field 700,000 mobilized men in 2022, which didn't include all of them actually finishing training. Israeli reservists do train more, and they had 3 years of active duty service prior to that. That's almost comparable to most professional army contract soldier stints. So when one looks at the Israeli active army at 126,000, it's not a big issue that 80% of it is made up of conscripts. The Turkish active army is double the size, and it has more professional troops. In 2017, some 55% of its army was professional troops. It's plausible that it's still around 50%. It's unknown if Turkish professional soldiers actually have more training and experience than Israeli conscripts. Given Israel's war, it's plausible that's not the case. And Turkish conscripts are surely not comparable, as they serve just 12 months, which after training leaves them maybe 6 months to be actually deployed and gather experience, compared to 30 months for most Israeli conscripts. Turkish reserves are smaller than Israeli and may not be called into service as often to sharpen up their skills. One area where Turkey does eclipse Israel is its paramilitary. Turkey uses 152,000 gendarmerie troops for internal peacekeeping. Those are lightly equipped troops, lacking much offensive military training, but are still an active duty force. Israel basically has just the 8,000 border guard troops, lightly equipped, as its army is the internal peacekeeping force. The two belligerents thus have comparable active and reserve ground forces, though Turkey has more maneuver brigades. Not all brigades are the same, of course, and it's likely Turkey has quite a few lightly equipped infantry units. Those do not require as much support. One can notice that Israeli active army has a better ratio of maneuver troops to remaining support troops. That's another reason why Israel might have a bit easier time logistically crossing Syria with its forces. Turkey's current army isn't designed to really move huge formations far outside its homeland. Of course, today's wars are fought with FPV drones as well, but such inventory info is simply not available. If anything, Israel is a bit better positioned there, as many of its vehicles have active protection systems, with radars and other sensors which can track incoming drones and then intercept them. Israel also has first-hand experience in using quadcopter drones in war since 2023. On the other hand, Turkey as a state might be better positioned industrially to really ramp up drone production quickly to vast numbers, but that goes beyond the scope of current military force comparison. Naval forces would play a secondary role in this war, so we will be brief here. Turkish navy is stronger, but both sides would keep distance from enemy shores and most of enemy aviation reach. Turkish part of Cyprus would be safe due to the large Turkish army contingent there, proximity to Turkey, and Israeli lack of amphibious assault assets. Turkey would have one ace up its sleeve. Due to its geographical position, it could upkeep a naval force in the middle of the Mediterranean to try to intercept some cargo ship destined for Israeli ports. That might force Israel to waste part of its air force on Mediterranean missions, and could impact the Israeli economy until Israel redistributes its import and export routes. As said, Israeli navy is too small and defensively oriented. Only 4 of the largest ships have decently ranged and advanced SAM systems, but if out in the open, even those ships' anti-air systems could not engage Turkish planes doing standoff attacks. Israeli submarines might be more useful. 2 larger and newer subs feature air-independent propulsion, making them harder to spot. Turkish subs are more plentiful, but not as advanced. They would be more static and protect northern Cyprus and Turkish shores. Besides one large helicopter carrier/assault ship, which would likely be the core of any Turkish Mediterranean task force, Turkey's main force would be its frigates. Their 8 modernized Perry-class frigates possess their most potent anti-air defenses. Besides 9 corvettes, Turkey operates 16 patrol boats with limited anti-submarine warfare capabilities and 18 missile boats. Turkish dedicated maritime patrol and anti-submarine aviation forces are much better than Israeli. Those could threaten Israeli submarines greatly, especially if subs are far away without persistent air cover. A short-term war might benefit Israel, but a long-term war might favor Turkey. Though modeling a total war economy over a long period is nigh impossible, so this is just a bunch of info to give a very rough overview. Turkey has a bigger population, more workers, and a larger economy and industry. Economy is hard to measure, but given that both countries would need to import a lot of components and supplies, something in between nominal and purchasing power GDP difference seems fair. Basically, Turkey's economy might be 3 to 4 times bigger. Its manufacturing sector alone is 4 times bigger in nominal dollar terms. Israel has a big and mature arms industry, but Turkey is quickly catching up. Export values do not mean the number of weapons exported is similar, as Turkish equipment tends to be cheaper. Plus, exports are really just part of overall expenses, with both Israeli and Turkish militaries being main customers for their respective countries' weapons. Again, due to several times lower salaries, $1 billion in Turkey buys more than $1 billion in Israel. While a clear-cut answer is not available, Binkov estimates that the Turkish defense industry isn't that far behind Israeli one, volume-wise, and that it is increasingly catching up in advanced weaponry as well. If the total war economy would be leveraged in both countries, Turkey might eventually start making more guided or complex weapons than Israel within a year or two. That's even if no sea cargo lane disruptions are applied. In addition to that, a multi-year war plays into the Turkish population pool advantage. 85 million people can produce more troops over the years than Israel's 9.9 million. If both sides see the war as a war of total conquest, then Turkey might realize that attacking early is not in its interest. Of course, if there's a time limit to this war, say a year or two, then there's a very high chance Israel would fare better due to its air force and air defense edge. On the other hand, in theory, if Turkey leverages its population advantage, mobilizes 8 million people, takes a few years to train them and leverages its industrial edge over Israel, then sending those forces over Syria in a crawling but steady push might have an effect. Yes, potentially millions of Turks might suffer casualties, far more than Israelis, but parts of Israel might eventually be taken. Perhaps enough so that Turkey proclaims some sort of victory. Of course, all this becomes moot when one adds nuclear weapons. Israel has them, while Turkey does not. Exact size of the Israeli arsenal is secret, but over the years most assessments suggested it's between 90 and 200 warheads. Delivery methods are various, from large ballistic missiles such as Jericho-3, which are too fast for Turkey to intercept, to cruise missile warheads and various bombs. All that is probably enough that much of Turkish economic, industrial and military potential gets destroyed. Turkey might still have a larger pool of people left, but at that point, without key industry, much of the infrastructure and big-ticket military bases, it would be very hard to keep fighting. And remember, Binkov may talk about war, but only real peace can bring us all together.